You know, many Canadians are quite concerned that an emissions cap on Canadian energy will not only kill jobs in Canada, but send many of those jobs to the United States. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachael Thomas, who joins us from her home in Lethbridge. Now, Rachael, even Canada's former finance minister, Bill Morneau, says the cap on our energy sector is just not a good idea.
Yeah, Hal, I think, look, at the end of the day, Canada produces oil and gas in an incredibly responsible manner. It's an industry that we should be proud of. It provides high-paying jobs while supplying a commodity that we need and the world needs. And so for Guilbeault, the Liberals, to come out and now want to apply a supposed cap on emissions, it really is actually not so much a cap on emissions, but actually it's a cap on jobs. It's a cap on a high paying jobs that Canadians depend on. It's a cap on Canada being able to meet its potential in terms of output and generating dollars that would go into building roads and schools and bridges and critical infrastructure that Canadians depend on. Ultimately, that is what this is a cap on. It's a cap on our prosperity as a nation and as the individual people who live here and call this place home. So make no mistake, this policy is going to do very little, if anything, to protect the environment. We already have some of the world's best environmental policies in place when it comes to oil and gas. This is simply just another Liberal attack on the people of this country who work incredibly hard.
Premier Daniel Smith and the UCP have also hinted that they may be suing the federal government once again over this potential emissions cap. They want to be 35% less than the 2019 levels. What are your thoughts?
I commend Premier Smith on her advocacy for the people of Alberta. She's certainly wanting to make sure that they have every opportunity to thrive. And so her gumption to be able to go up against the establishment in Ottawa and to defend the interests of our province, I think is the right thing. I believe that she is acting in the best interest of those that have elected her. She clearly has a mandate to act in the way that she is. And I think that, should she be successful, it will definitely serve Albertans well.
Now, we've heard your leader, Pierre Poilievre, say time and time again that after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, millions more Canadians are now going to food banks because they're having a really tough time making ends meet. Now, Poilievre says he has a plan to help Canadians meet their basic needs. Rachael, what does that plan really look like for your party?
Yeah, look, we know that Canadians are worse off than they have been in at least 40 years. And of course, that's due to the government that's currently in place, led by Prime Minister Trudeau. Unfortunately, he's just made decisions to spend carelessly. And as a result, inflation has been driven up, interest rates have been driven up. And as a result, Canadians are paying more than ever before. I'm hearing from people who are coming into my office who, they're having to make difficult decisions between paying their utility bill or paying for food or properly feeding their families. Um, in terms of a conservative plan, our plan is really common sense. If you rein in the spending and you make sure that you're responsible, spending within your means only, then of course that reduces inflation. Further to that, we would be introducing a dollar for dollar rule. So if we're going to spend an extra dollar, then we have to find a dollar of savings when we're in government. And I think as well, we've made it very clear that we intend to scrap the carbon tax. That'll be our first order of business when we form government. And we know that this is costing Canadians, a ton of money. It's adding to their gas bill, their grocery bill, their utilities bill. Everything costs more because of the carbon tax. So, of course, we look forward to taking an axe to that and getting rid of it altogether for all time.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about that carbon tax for a moment here, Rachael. Many would argue that it has been very hurtful to a number of Canadians, from farmers to the truckers who deliver our food. In fact, a recent report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer also says that even with rebate checks that Ottawa is dishing out, overall Canadians are spending much more than we're actually getting back. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, certainly. Again, that's, the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, affirmed that Canadians are worse off with the carbon tax. We know that in the province of Alberta, after rebate, Albertans are still paying about $700 more for the carbon tax than they would be if we didn't have it. And so again, this is just another example where this government is out of touch with the reality of Canadians and actually putting policy in place that's incredibly punitive in nature. Canadians deserve better. Canadians deserve hope. They deserve prosperity. They deserve opportunity. And common sense conservatives are committed to doing that. And again, it starts with step one, which is to axe the carbon tax.
Now, since being elected south of the border, Donald Trump says he's bringing forth legislation to have millions of illegal immigrants deported. And some believe a number of those illegal immigrants who've not been vetted properly will make their way to Canada. Some of those illegal immigrants having criminal records, maybe even jihadists. Should we really be concerned here in our country about a lot of those illegals making their way over across the border?
How the first order of any government should be the safety and security of its citizens, which means ultimately securing our borders and making sure that immigration processes are followed properly. Canada has an incredibly robust and compassionate immigration system traditionally. Under this government, however, it has been absolute chaos. And so, unfortunately, we have seen many illegal immigrants come into the country, and some of those individuals pose a threat. So just recently, we know that there were two former ISIS fighters who came into this country and they were granted citizenship. And they went on to then plot a terrorist attack in Toronto. It was discovered then that one of these individuals actually dismembered someone in 2015 with a sword and then posted it on media for people to see. That's very blatant. That's very obvious that that individual should not have been granted citizenship. So, Canadians are asking, well, what is the vetting process? Why was this individual not caught? Why was this not known? How did this individual end up being granted an opportunity to come to Canada, let alone become a citizen of this country? And so clearly, there's a great deal of work that needs to be done with regards to how people are vetted and allowed to take the oath of citizenship in this country. And I think Canadians are rightly concerned with how things are going right now under Trudeau, and they're certainly asking for change. And so, as Conservatives, we're committed to restoring our immigration system to what it once was, which was, a system that was based on fairness, a system that was based on rules and procedures and protocols, and ultimately a system that served our country well economically.
So, Rachel, many Canadians are also quite concerned over Donald Trump's protectionist policies. Buy American, American jobs first. It's understandable. He's the leader of that country. But if your party forms government in the next federal election, how will you really work with Donald Trump to ensure that he doesn't go ballistic with tariffs, including on our softwood lumber?
Yeah, it's certainly a good question. We know that President Trump has every intention of making sure that he protects the interests of America. Um, at the same time, here in Canada, we should have a leader who's advocating for the best interests of Canadians. Unfortunately, under Trudeau, we don't have that. But the good news is an election is coming, and we will form a new government under Pierre Poilievre. And he does have the interest of Canadians in mind. And so I think with that, we're wanting to scrap the carbon tax because we know that it's causing jobs to go south of the border. We know that it's penalizing us. In addition to that, we're looking to make sure that people are able to bring home powerful paychecks, and we're looking to make sure that jobs are saved, and ultimately to stand up for the interests of Canadians. Part of that is reaching out and building a relationship with Trump and his administration. And I think we are already putting a plan in place in terms of what that might look like.
Now, another question I have for you is the federal government here in Canada has been giving billions of dollars to Ukraine in their fight against Russia. Many of us very definitely want to support Ukraine as Russia has invaded that country, a sovereign nation. But then a lot of other Canadians are saying, why not help Canadians here at home first? Our veterans, our homeless, those battling addictions. Why not keep the money here internally in our country and help millions of Canadians first before sending off so many billions of tax dollars to other nations? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a difficult predicament that we find ourselves in. As a country, we've committed to being generous in humanitarian efforts and of course, supporting our allies. Um, and so we have contributed to the efforts, in particular toward Ukraine. Um, at the same time, we certainly have Canadians who are struggling here, whether it's with mental health or with addiction, with homelessness, and those needs also need our attention. So I think these are the difficult conversations that we need to continue having at a leadership level, but also leaning in and listening closely to Canadians and making sure that we know where they stand on these issues and then acting accordingly.
Now, the latest polls show the Conservative Party of Canada has close to a 20-point lead over the Trudeau Liberals. Rachel, how can you really maintain that momentum heading into the next election? Or do we have to maybe wait until Jagmeet Singh qualifies for his pension before heading to the polls?
Well, obviously Pierre Poilievre has been working very, very hard as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. He's out every single day meeting with regular folks and making sure that he's hearing their stories and understanding their experiences. He's someone who has great stamina and a great passion for this country and its people. And so you asked the question, can that be maintained? Absolutely, it can, because it comes from the very core of his being. He loves the nation of Canada and he's passionate about making sure that the people are served well. He's also incredibly hardworking and he has smart policy. And so coming forward with good options for Canadians, I think is really what's going to help him as we continue to prepare for the next election, and of course, earn the trust of Canadians.
Why do you think a lot of Conservative policies have really been resonating in Liberal strongholds, traditional strongholds like Toronto? I mean, especially winning that Toronto by-election. Why do you think that's happening more in central Canada now?
Yeah, for sure. Again, I think it has to do with the fact that, Pierre Poilievre, as the leader of the Conservatives, is putting his feet on the ground and really listening to folks. He's having conversations with regular individuals, whether it's at gas stations or grocery stores or workplaces. He's engaging with people where they're at and taking the time to understand what they're concerned about. And so, as Conservatives, I believe that we've prioritized those things that matter most to Canadians. We're committed to axing the tax. We're committed to building homes, which we know is much needed. We're committed to fixing the budget, which we know is totally out of control and causing inflation like never before. And we're committed to stopping the crime, which we know is running rampant and it's causing people to feel unsafe, because quite frankly, they are unsafe because there's crime that is just skyrocketing. And so that needs to be taken care of. And so I think these are the issues that matter most to Canadians, and they're the issues that we're responding to as Conservatives.
Yeah, let's talk about gun crime. And we've seen a huge increase across the country, especially in major centers like Toronto and Vancouver over the last few years. What approach would your party take differently compared to the Liberals in addressing so many of the violent crimes here in Canada?
Yeah, we know that violent gun crime is up by 116%. So it's skyrocketed. We know that this is having an impact on the safety and well-being of communities. And it's not, it's not just some communities, it really is all communities across the country are affected by this, at least in some way. Mr. Trudeau came out just a couple of weeks ago bragging about his handgun ban and the legislation that he's put in place with regards to firearms. At the end of the day, we know that that legislation actually only went against those who legally own their firearm and use their firearm responsibly. It didn't go after criminals. And the reason we know that is because actually multiple police associations came out and actually attacked Trudeau on his claim. They actually wanted to clear the record. They wanted to set it straight. So for example, in Toronto, the police association came out and actually said, sir, Mr. Trudeau, the rates of gun crime are actually skyrocketing in comparison to what they were before the Liberals' legislation. So we're seeing where there's a disconnect. I think Trudeau is more interested in appearing like he's creating safety for Canadians than actually creating safety for Canadians. In fact, his legislation, it only worked to divide Canadians. It only worked to attack or scapegoat those individuals who use their firearms for hunting or sports shooting, or for Indigenous folks who also have rifles and often use them for hunting, et cetera, as well. That's not an effective law. At the end of the day, Canadians are not safer because of Trudeau. They're actually put into greater harm.
Now, you've been quite critical of the Trudeau government in the past, saying that censorship has increased exponentially with bills such as C-18 and I believe C-11. Can you explain how these bills are, quote, suffocating the Canadian public?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Look, free speech is an issue that I am extremely passionate about, because if you do not have free speech, the foundations of democracy are under attack. It is that fundamental. And so Bill C-18 actually attacks the freedom of Canadians in terms of their ability to access the news that they would wish to access. So essentially what Trudeau did is under the Liberals, they put law in place that basically favors the big broadcasters and puts other media companies at risk of even existing. It also prevents Canadians from being able to access news on places like Facebook or Instagram, et cetera, which of course Canadians depend on those spaces for the exchange of news. C18 is something that definitely favors the large corporate news entities in exchange for going after the small ones and essentially putting them in the ground. Or a nail in the coffin, some might say. And so I have huge concerns there with regards to freedom of choice and of course, the opportunity that Canadians have to be able to access different sources. With regards to Bill C11, ultimately what this does is it breaks your search bar. You think that you're going online and looking for one thing, but actually the government is rerouting you to what they want you to see. So ultimately, it puts the government in the driver's seat in terms of what you can see or say or hear online, which is very scary.
Now, your leader, Pierre Poilievre, says he wants to defund the CBC, Rachel. Now, do you back him on this, or is it just for English TV programming?
Well, look, so when it comes to the CBC, they receive $1.4 billion from Canadian taxpayers. And we know that despite receiving that lofty amount of money, we know that viewership is down. We know that trust is down. We know that ad revenue is down. And we know that despite this abysmal performance, that Catherine Tate, the CEO of the CBC, determined that the executives should get $18 million worth of bonuses. This is crazy. This is crazy. Of course, Canadians are upset by this. So, to answer your question directly, Pierre Poilievre has been very clear. We intend to defund the CBC. We also intend, however, to keep Radio Canada because we understand its importance in certain places within Canada where it's more difficult to access news. And so we want to make sure that in those remote areas and in Quebec that access is granted. But make no mistake, in terms of the CBC, it will be defunded.
Conservative MP Rachael Thomas, thanks so much for your time today and for joining us from your home in Lethbridge.
Thank you, Hal. Good to be with you.